As the news that much of the world is waking up to, the invasion of Ukraine has escalated overnight. More Russian airstrikes, tanks and troops called in as explosions rung out across the country.
Air raid sirens have been sounding in Kyiv and other cities, prompting people to take shelter in metro stations. Ukraine's government says at least 137 of its soldiers and civilians have been killed across the country. President Putin of Russia has claimed he's willing to negotiate after Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky raised the possibility of discussing a neutral status for Ukraine. It is day 2 of a war that until just yesterday was for many unimaginable. And the scenes that the hours since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began have left us, bring to mind times that Europe hoped to have long left behind. Metro stations turned into bomb shelters, civilians arming themselves to defend their country in heavy shelling in Kyiv and across Ukraine.
It's hard, but I'm holding on. A nearby house caught fire, and there were many victims. And we were waiting until 7 o'clock in the morning in our apartment, in the corridor, in the bathroom, until the end of curfew, so that we could come here. I work here.
Ken, do Ukrainians think the world is doing enough to help them?
I don't think so. A lot of them do not understand what sanctions will do. They believe in direct physical conflict.
So do the Ukrainians want troops on the ground? Do they want airstrikes? What are they saying to you?
I haven't heard a lot myself. I've been very secluded here today, but the general consensus that I know from the people that I am friends with here is that, yeah, they would prefer some kind of physical intervention.
Another terrifying start to the day in Kyiv. Overnight, there was more destruction. Bombs rained down, forcing residents to flee to safety in bunkers. Metro stations and cellars packed with residents grappling to come to terms with their new reality. I feel mostly tired and anxious. It's so strange. None of it feels real. I don't even know how to relate to it all.
It's definitely our view that the Russians intend to invade the whole of Ukraine. The nonsense they were spouting about the Donbass, and it were, you know, as ever with a whole series of dishonest claims, are not the case, and that's why you've seen a number of columns of Russian army entering the city from the south, from the north, from Belarus even, and indeed from the separatist region. But, you know, our assessment as of this morning is that Russia has not taken any of its major objectives. In fact, it is behind its hoped-for timetable. They've lost over 450 personnel. And indeed, as you've said on your report, one of the significant airports they were trying to capture with their elite Spetsnaz has failed to be taken. And in fact, the Ukrainians have taken it back.
U.S. troops stationed in Europe are on high alert this morning as Russia moves farther into Ukraine. NBC News global security reporter Dan DeLuce joins us now. So, Dan, catch us up here. Where do things stand at this hour in terms of how American troops are positioned in Eastern Europe? We know they're not going to go into Ukraine, but what is their job now?
Well, they have a number of missions, and one of them is symbolic, and some of them are concrete. The first is really a message to Russia not to attack NATO and all NATO members, especially those on the eastern flank that border Russia. And some of those NATO member states have very bad history with Russia, and they very much wanted reassurance. And so the U.S. and some other members of NATO have sent forces, troops, helicopters, equipment to the Baltics, to Poland, to Romania, all of those Eastern European countries inside the NATO alliance. Now, there's also the possibility that some of those U.S. troops, the 82nd Airborne, has elements in Poland. They could be helping with this likely refugee influx that we could see coming from Ukraine into Poland and into the West. And it's possible the U.S. Soldiers there would help out with that. And then also I should mention NATO had an emergency meeting this morning, and the officials there reaffirmed that they would continue to flow forces into Eastern Europe to deter Russia from trying in any way to move beyond Ukraine into the east.